Hello, welcome to this webinar from Brunel University on the International Relations MA program. I'm very glad that you could join me for this. My name is John Macmillan. I'm the program director, and it's a pleasure to be able to tell you something about the program, but also I thought something about the wider field of international relations. So what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the subject area to give you a sense of how we as academics might think about certain contemporary issues or what we see in the wider world around us. And then a little bit also about the course itself, and then at the end to leave some time for your questions. So let me start with our topic, which is going to be the challenge of international order in the 21st century. Now, if we look at this sort of montage of images from contemporary international relations, the point I'd make is how quickly things can change and how much is going on in the wider world. So part of what we might do is try to identify some underlying structural, historical forces that may provide some connection, see the links between these different factors, but I thought I'd quickly work around some of these to look at the sorts of challenges we will face, or particularly your generation perhaps would face through the 21st century. So if we start at the top left-hand corner, we can see here the fence that has gone up between Hungary and Serbia to prevent migrants, refugees traveling into and through Europe. Yeah, yet despite these tall razor wire fences, there's still thousands of people that are able to travel through. States no longer have the capacity, the will perhaps, to prevent this large-scale migration. Now, once upon a time, we might think in the 19th or the 20th century, then if people had a lot of political or social problems in their own state, they may have chosen to have a revolution. In the 21st century, it may be that if people have lots of problems in their own state, they simply move elsewhere with their families. So migration in the 21st century will be a major issue, much more so than in recent years. And part of the issue there is the ways in which states will find they can no longer control the flow of people throughout the world. And this has direct implications for community, sovereignty, political order. If we move on to the next slide, then we see here a picture of the Middle East, and I'd stress here again the way the Arab Spring appeared as a surprise for many people. The political forces, the cries for democratization, for a better life, then these ended up being somewhat suppressed in the majority of cases, and in some cases, Libya, Syria in particular, then a wide, large, devastating civil war has emerged. So old problems of violence, civil war, are still major issues here. And of course that's linked to the migration issue in the first slide. If we move down to see a picture of David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, then he's currently grappling with the idea of Britain leaving the European Union, Brexit. And you can see he doesn't look very happy about this. But this is of major historical and political significance, because what we find is that one of the world's most successful institutions in terms of moving us beyond warfare in Europe, developing prosperity, is increasingly under threat as publics throughout Europe become disaffected. And that sort of nationalistic populism is clearly evident in Donald Trump's bid to become the United States president. And this is very significant because what we have here is within the heartland of the Anglo-American liberal international order that was established post-1945, we find within the heartland people becoming increasingly disaffected, increasingly want to move away from the sort of internationalism that has provided for trade, finance, travel throughout the post-war period and has contributed towards economic growth and peace, at least in the developed world. So we have there quite a fundamental challenge not least in the context of the rise of other powers. We could see Russia, but more particularly China, that for the first time in 300 or 400 years we find a shift in the locus of power, the shift in the sort of the gravitational shift towards Asia. Again, a very, very significant historical development now. And the last slide I would draw upon would be the one showing the persistence of poverty and underdevelopment. Each day we have the tragedy of 30,000 children dying from diseases that have been eradicated in the Western world. So we can see that in terms of the international order, the problems that we face in the world, there's a very, very pressing agenda. What I would point to in this next slide is that it also raises the question of the puzzle of order, because what we find is that we have extensive social, political relations, we have an infrastructure for migration, for travel, institutions, the United Nations, the EU, we have trillions of dollars of financial exchanges every day, global supply chains for goods, for commerce. Yet what we don't have is a central government or central authority. There is no, if you like, world state. And in some respects that might seem, the idea that we don't have a world state is of course obvious, because when we look around, the world's divided between different countries. But I suggest to you that we might be moving, at least historically, in the direction of a world state, much more so than we perhaps realize. So what I want to suggest is that the challenges of order on the previous slide need to be thought of in conjunction with the fragility of the institutions or the mechanisms through which order is maintained, because we don't have a central government. When order collapses, the costs of failure are very, very high. These are in terms of economic dislocation, depression, economic depression as in the 1930s, and of course war. So this is a high stakes, international relations is a high stakes activity. So if we turn now to how we might think then about the puzzle of how order is maintained in the absence of a central government, and specifically what challenges we might face in the 21st century. Now here I'll turn to another diagram which I think is a thing of beauty. Not everybody does, but here we are. It's a chart by the scholar Giovanni Arrighi, who looks at patterns of, it's called patterns of world capitalism, but it's patterns of world order over time. And there's some things here that might be familiar and other things perhaps less so. What might be familiar is if we see the place of the United States as a hegemonic power, a power that has been able to underwrite international order since 1945. And beneath that we see Britain, who through the 19th century had its own hegemonic period of rule and ordering. So in answer to our puzzle, the way in which order has tended to be maintained in the modern world has been through the role of a leading power, the US, Britain, and prior to that, the Dutch, the United Provinces, and the Genoese. So that itself may not be all that unfamiliar, but if we look at the left-hand column, then what we see is changes in size or scale of the leading hegemonic power. So we've gone from small actors, city-states, such as the Genoese, through nation-states, up to, well, we wouldn't call the US quite a world state, but one that has extensive reach and influence and operates throughout a wide range of multilateral institutions and organizations. It's moving towards a world state. And that may seem unusual to us, but the degree of multilateralism, of cooperation, suggests that historically at least, the scale of political organization is becoming greater. If we flow from left to right, then what we also see is that over time, these leading powers have taken responsibility for a greater range of areas of social activity. So from security, trade, finance, through to reproduction. But if we look more closely, we see that to date, none of these powers has actually taken responsibility for reproduction. What does that mean? What Origi is suggesting is that whichever power or entity succeeds the United States will have to take responsibility for the ecological system and also for poverty, to have a more inclusive, sustainable world, which I think is an interesting sort of structural observation on where we need to be going as a species, if you like. So here, the thrust of this diagram is to suggest that counterintuitively perhaps we might be moving more close to a world state in one form or another than we currently think. And also to identify some of the challenges for the 21st century in terms of poverty and ecological reproduction. Okay, so the themes I would draw from that is the way in which international relations, each generation that studies international relations faces new challenges and needs to think in a fresh, new way to try to address those challenges. For those who study international politics, it will help you engage authoritatively in a global conversation about how we might approach or address these challenges, hopefully in a way which can be politically effective, but also ethically more satisfactory. So let me move on from talking about the subject to about the international relations at Brunel. The first point I'd make here is that we have a diverse student intake. Every year it's a pleasure to welcome students from different countries in the world, but by diverse intake I'd also emphasize that students come to international relations with a wide range of disciplinary academic backgrounds, and this is very, very common and a strength of the subject, because students will bring their own expertise, their background to a fresh area in many cases. So we're very happy to welcome students from a wide range of countries and with a wide range of disciplinary backgrounds. At Brunel, we've made some changes, some developments to the program itself, which I think provide a more robust program in that it also allows students greater choice of modules. So all students who come to study at Brunel will take the course Evolution of International Relations, which is equivalent of an IR theory course, which is quite common to all programs. The theory is the spine of the subject. But students will also take a course in one of the main subfields, either international security and or international political economy. And this is, I think, a very valuable a very valuable course to take, either of these, because they relate very much to future areas of employment in many cases, or to the main areas of research and knowledge development within the subject area. So a very, very solid foundation in the field of international relations is one of the things that we look to develop at Brunel for our students. All our students will also take a module on research training, and here we look to develop the generic but also subject-specific skills, research techniques, ways of thinking about research in the social sciences. And again, we're aware that employers value this. It's something that sets master students apart from other sorts of students, from undergraduate students. So it's a strength to the program. Also, students can choose from a diverse range of optional modules. I'm pleased to say that one of the new modules next year is China and Contemporary Geopolitics, and we have another new module on Middle East security. Besides these, we'll also be offering Democracy and Intervention, the United States and World Affairs, Multiculturalism and Human Rights, and Imperialism and Culture. So if students chose to, if you were to come and if you were to choose one of the key subfields, say international security, you could then choose 4 of these optional modules. which will run for half a year. Besides that, all students over the summer would take a dissertation, which would be a research project on a subject of your own choice within the field, and you'll be supervised by a member of staff there. In terms of the extracurricular activities, then we have institutional membership of Chatham House. And this is one of the world's leading think tanks, and this is a chance for networking, for hearing, meeting figures in the diplomatic world, the political world. They also have a very active under 35 program there for meeting sort of contemporaries there. I think that's all I'll say about the program, because I'd like to leave some time for questions now. I have some questions that I received earlier, but let me just pause to see if anybody else would like to offer some questions, and I'll come back to those in a moment. I know dead air is not good on the radio or the web or the webinar, but I'll just pause for 10 seconds or so to see if anything else appears. Thank you. Okay, well, there's no need for me to, if a question comes up, then that's fine. If a question comes up, that's fine. But in the meantime, let me answer some of the questions that one of you kindly put in earlier. One was about, the first one was 3 questions. The first was about practical experience, the second about mentoring and support, and the third about whether students have a background in IR. So in terms of practical experience, now what do we offer you in the program by way of extra activities outside of the classroom? Then Chatham House, as I just mentioned, is a key part of the program, and it's good for students to, if you like, participate in the wider world of international relations as they're discussed in London, which, as you know, is one of the centres of IR. So Chatham House is one factor that I've already discussed, but we're also working on, and I cannot guarantee at this point, but we're working on the introduction of internships and placements for next year. So we might be able to pilot this for next year. It won't be a large-scale program, but if there's anybody that's particularly interested, we might well be able to offer something here. But if that's a major factor in your thinking about whether to come to Brunel, please email me in 3 to 4 weeks, and I'll be able to update you on how we're doing with that. So that would be another aspect, an internship that would run over the summer months. The second question was about mentoring, advising, support. Brunel is very strong on this, I would say. In terms of at the individual program level, then all of you will have a personal tutor. Usually it's the course director. But besides that, who you can talk to at any time, the course director, all of the academic staff have office hours every week, or you're welcome to see us by appointment. You will have the module tutors are also widely available to discuss your work or the subject area. And you'll also, of course, have a dissertation supervisor who you'll work with closely over the summer months. So in the first instance, there's a range of people. We pride ourselves on being a very accessible, I'd like to think, friendly department. But in the first instance, it's the personal tutor who you would liaise with in terms of advice, mentoring sorts of issues. Beyond that, if there are any particular language or study skills issues, we have a lot of institutional support, including, for example, supplementary classes in some cases, or language support to address any issues that might arise. So I hope that deals with that question. The third one about an academic background in IR, I touched on that in the talk, but let me re-emphasize that international relations has always been a subject that people tend to come to later on, particularly at master's level. IR isn't taught at school. It's always new to people. So people come with backgrounds in law, history, politics, economics, business, a whole range of subject areas. Now, one of our best students had a background in chemistry and went on to study for a PhD in international relations. And the only issue I would say there is that when a student has a background in a subject area that isn't essay-based, then we would want to take a close look at the application. Which is not to say it's a problem, not at all, but we want to make sure that our students have the skills in place so that they can successfully take the program. And the fact that students do come with a wide range of academic backgrounds makes for a much more interesting subject area. People bring with it skills, experience, insights that enrich our discussions every week. Okay, I'll pause now just to see if any other questions come up. Okay, I don't see any. I'd like to thank you once again for logging on to this webinar. I do hope you found it useful. Let me put the last slide on, because what it does do is have my email address. My email address is at the bottom. If there are any questions, any point, do feel free to email me, and it'll be a pleasure to get back to you. So, I naturally hope to see you in September or October, and in the meantime, if there's anything I can be of help with, either questions about the course or perhaps even preliminary reading, do get in touch. Best wishes. Thank you. Bye-bye.